now the right-wing lunatic fringe in our country's government is crashing into our world of wrestling. Brian, we might even be able to go back to YouTube for this one, because we've just mentioned this. It was either on the Drive-Thru or last week's Experience that some nut's been accusing Stan Lane of being the father of that Lauren Boebert idiot. She's one of the pro-gun Congress people. We've mentioned it's easier for those international fans. It's easier to be elected to the House of Representatives than the Senate. The Senate's statewide in each state. You only get a couple, and it's a big fucking deal. But some of these Congress people, the House of Representatives, there's 400 and something of them, and that's where these QAnon nitwits and fringe lunatics have started infiltrating. And one of them is named Lauren Boebert. And she's from, where is it, Colorado?
Yes.
She was elected in Colorado. She's originally from Florida. And apparently her mother for years has been going around trying to tell everybody that Lauren Boebert is Stan Lane's daughter. And we were making fun of it the other day, but now it's not only actually gaining ground in the news, but guess who's on the story, folks? Bitch the journalist. Bitch the journalist is on the, so you know it's horse shit. But, oh my God. People are taking this and running with it on the basis of some nut making comments for years on Facebook or whatever. And we told a story of Stan actually had an impersonator of himself that when he died in Memphis, the obituary, they wrote about it in the newspaper. It became a newspaper story. Stan Lane of the Fabulous Ones dies. Except he didn't, because it wasn't. The guy told his wife he'd been Stan Lane of the Fabulous Ones. And nobody in her family wanted to pop her bubble and disappoint her. So they buried Stan Lane. This kind of shit used to happen more often than it does now. And of course, this thing's 20-some, almost 30 years old. But it used to happen more often than it does now because there was no internet and the things weren't as easily checked. And at the same point, there also was no internet where people could spread this bullshit around, so it didn't catch like that. Now, I'm not saying that no wrestlers ever fathered any children. For heaven's sake, that's ridiculous. With anybody at the matches or anywhere else, that's ridiculous. But it used to be to the point where the first thing that you would think when you heard that some girl was claiming to be pregnant by somebody was horseshit, because there was so much more incidences of horseshit than it was legitimate. So I don't know if you discovered any more breaking news on this Lauren Boebert story besides the fact that bitch the journalist is on the case, and that should make it look a little sideways even then. But
I do have more news on the story. I will say in reference to Yenta Bixenspan, the sleaze merchant of wrestling Twitter, being involved, it should surprise no one that a story involving sex would be covered by someone who's never had sex. What a surprise there. Now, I actually found it offensive because he blocked me after the last time we exposed him on the show. So I don't see his stuff, which is fine because I already had him on mute for like 6 months before that, so I didn't really miss anything. And I think last time we checked, he had tweeted over 200,000 times. It's a bit tedious to have all that in your daily feed. But someone sent it to me so I could see it, and it was just like this pathetic plea for Twitter attention. Like, so, I'm going to look into this story, and there's a lot of things going on here. It's basically no journalist behaves like this. No one says, I'm going to be looking into a salacious story. You may be seeing about it somewhere. And it was several tweets like that because he's pathetic and he's not a real journalist. He's a wrestling message board troll. And I guess we can call Twitter a job for him because it's all he does. His entire life and social existence is via Twitter. It was really pathetic. With that said, there's some story here that someone should look into. It should just be a real journalist. It shouldn't be someone who's a goof
I think the story to be looked into is the drooler that's trying to hop on everybody else's coattails. That should be a story. But anyway, if here without entertainment content, here's what I know about Stan Lane's offspring, if any, and that is that there are none. Now that I have seen this again, this could very well be, because we've told this story before, that Stan avoided Florida for a period of time in the late 80s because this woman was trying to file a paternity suit against him. And finally, he was served in Charlotte, North Carolina, and had to submit to the test, and it wasn't even close. And this is the same. So I'm wondering, and I haven't talked to Stan. Actually, I should probably call him and say, hey, he doesn't pay any attention to wrestling, and he probably doesn't know he's in the news, and I'd rather leave it that way. But if this is the same one, it's the same shit. And I guarantee you, and I can tell you from personal experience, some of these people do not give up. But I rode in the car with, was friends with, was in constant contact with Stan Lane from 1987 through the mid-90s. And then, obviously, we've been in contact since then, but actually on a daily basis with all the years that I worked with him. And discussions on all these things came up. He don't have any kids. And there was a person trying to pin something on him from Florida during that period of time. And he had no reason to get in the car one day and say, that was close or anything like that. No, it was bullshit, and he thought it was bullshit. So I don't know if this is the same one, but that brings up something that they don't do in wrestling anymore. When you go to the matches now, and I guess you can't really get away with it anymore, but when you go to the matches now, do you ever have people telling you I'm related that aren't? I'm related to the wrestlers? No, because the crowd is mostly all the fucking guys' families. What am I thinking about? Maybe I should rephrase that question. When you used to go to the matches in the 70s and 80s, there were always people in any arena who claimed to be the wife, the girlfriend, the daughter, the cousin, the son, whatever the case may be, wrestler X, Y, or Z. I remember there was some girl in Louisville that used to claim to be Jerry Jarrett's either wife or sister. Now that I'm thinking about it, wife or sister, but it used to, people would go up, fans would go up to Teeny at the box office. Oh, I just saw your daughter-in-law, whatever she said. And she's trying not to, be mad at the fans or whatever, but she's like, she's not related to me. Or Lawler. Everybody was Lawler's cousin, right? There was this one guy in Louisville that he would stand near the back door, was there where they could peek and see when the wrestlers were coming in. And if he got there late, he'd say, is Lawler here yet? And somebody said, no. Well, I guess he's riding up here with one of my other cousins. Yeah, maybe fucking Amelia Earhart's flying them up here in her private fucking plane too. But nobody knew the fucking difference. They would buy things like that. But when it came to paternity, yes, the things like that happened. But in a lot of cases, if they hate it when I say arena rats these days, because that's not politically correct, right? So when one of the young ladies who frequented the matches for certain purposes would get pregnant, a lot of times she would make a list out of the potential candidates and prioritize it from top to bottom in who she wanted it to be, and then would confront those people. And as you went down the list, the first one to say, oh, shit, I'm sorry, and accept it would win the pony. And that's the way that happened before there was a lot of blood testing and things back in the old days, or at least there's been blood tests since the fucking Civil War, I guess. But you know what I mean? The DNA and all this close shit. As it was able to be narrowed down, that went out of fashion in wrestling. But a lot of times, that kind of thing happened. Brian, have you ever had a paternity test?
I have not. thankfully. And in terms of people going to wrestling saying they're related to the wrestlers, the one I remember when I was a kid was Boss Hog Calhoun, who went to wrestling shows and claimed to be the grandson of Haystacks Calhoun, who was going to be debuting against The Undertaker soon. And as a kid, it made sense. He was fat, sloppy, and in overalls.
Yeah.
He must be related to Haystacks Calhoun. But we have more news about the Stan Lane story.
There was a Tojo Yamamoto Jr. in Tennessee at one point. I'll say just more news, you say?
We have more news on the Stan Lane, Lauren Boebert story. One of the listeners, Dustin Lafferty, sent some news to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com. There's an article about Boebert that was in the Colorado Sun in September, I believe, and there's a couple lines there that are interesting. One, quote, Boebert has glossed over any mention of a father. She has not explained why she has 2 birth dates in official records. She has not responded to questions about what the multiracial background is that she has listed on official forms.
What wait a minute. Let's see, what race is Stan Lane? He's probably Norwegian with a slice of Irish. I don't fucking know. What is the rest of her race that she claims is mixed?
Boy, you went right past the fact that she has 2 birth dates on record.
Well, I know a number of people with 2 birth, but here the whole thing boils down to methinks her mother is a nut, because her mother's the one's been making all the claims about Stan. And does the story mention her mother?
In fact, it does. Here's another quote from the story. Boebert's mother, Sean Bentz, who currently works at Shooters, did not return calls asking for information about the family's history.
Shooters is the gun-themed restaurant that this woman, Lauren Boebert, and her gun-loving nutcase husband run in Colorado for more gun fanatics to come and bring their guns. And her mother works there also.
Again, the mother, Sean Bentz, did not return calls asking for information about the family's history after her shift from relying on welfare to decrying government support, or about her purported political switch from Democrat to QAnon follower.
The plot sickens.
Now, she is in Colorado. Did you ever think there's a chance she leaves Florida and is taken in by, I don't know, let's say a member of the Midnight Express who felt like he was not treated right? Is Dennis Condrey behind this whole thing?
No, now, wait a minute. Now, don't try
It's Colorado.
Don't try to work an angle between Dennis and Stan, for heaven's sake. But no, anyway, I mean, I think it sounds like that her mother is a nut. Especially if it's the same case that I was aware of and experienced in real time, and this woman is the one that's been making all these claims for all this period of time and she claims to be Stan Lane's, or is this where I was going in with the relative stories? She claims to be Stan Lane's cousin.
I'm not sure. I actually took it as her saying that years later, she was able to get a blood sample from one of Stan's cousins. That's the way I took it.
There was somebody saying that it was a product of an incestuous relationship between Stan Lane and his first cousin. And that's just ridiculous. And that's what I'm saying with it. And you get Bitch the journalist on this thing, you don't know where it's going to go. But I disbelieve it. And that's what?
I was going to say a couple things. Just to give you an example of what a noted journalist Yenta Bixenspan is, here's one of his tweets. Because I hate myself, I'm looking over newspaper clippings to see what bookings Stan Lane had in March of 1986, besides those on Wrestling Data, to figure out what towns he may have done sex in.
Oh, good God.
What a fucking pathetic loser. Who writes like that? Who talks like that? Someone looking for attention.
Well, besides that, in the Florida territory, you were home almost every night, so it didn't really matter anyway.
What towns he may have done sex in.
perpetrated the sexual activity in.
You know who's never done
made
sex?
With the sexy time.
You know who's never done sex?
Bitch.
Yenta Bixenspan. Funny enough. But one other wrinkle here to the story, I have the court records from Seminole County, Florida. What's Stan Lane's real name?
Well, you tell me what they've got, and I'll tell you whether they're right. Because
it doesn't match up part of it. I don't know what his legitimate first name may be, but according to everything I've ever heard from you, the middle name is off. It has Sean E. Roberts, the petitioner, against Wallace Stanley Lane, the respondent. And again, I always knew it as Stanfield, not
Stanfield.
Stanley.
Wallace Stanfield Lane.
He hated Stanley, didn't he?
Hated Stanley. Hated Stanley. Yeah, it sounds like it very well may be the same woman that's been malingering around him for the past 30 years.
Well, for the record, here in this, I don't know what you call this, I guess what's in the docket, it shows that she filed the complaint, the paternity complaint, originally January 17th, 1989. And then in April of 1990, Stan, it says added attorney. I don't know if that means he just finally got an attorney to deal with this. And it also shows that on November 5th, 1990, there was a notice of filing paternity blood test, followed by voluntary dismissal with prejudice by petitioner.
Voluntary dismissal?
By petitioner, which was Sean E. Roberts. So he took the blood test, and then she dismissed the case.
Well, but she didn't dismiss it from her mind. Here's the thing. And before everybody accuses me a bit, well, he's so misogynist because he's taking the man's side. Brian, I asked you if you had a paternity test. You didn't ask me if I'd ever had a paternity test.
Have you ever had a paternity test?
Yes, I have. And I'll tell you exactly how and why. In Louisiana, there was a young lady in Shreveport that basically they should have given her a memorial suite at the Alamo Plaza Motor Inn. She was there an awful lot. And she had, at one point in time, done the same thing we're talking about with one of the wrestlers in the Louisiana Territory. If I said his name, chances are 1 in 100,000 people would remember it, so I'm not even going to. Underneath guy was never famous, didn't make a lot of money or whatever, but he was known to be or alleged to be or whatever the father of one of her children. So then, after I leave the Mid-South Territory, I hear when I'm in Dallas, because Dallas was right, 3 hours from Shreveport, and guys would come back and forth, and they were trading talent. And then in Charlotte, when I'd see somebody that just come from there and say, hey, because her nickname was Shotgun. Hey, Shotgun saying she's pregnant and the baby is yours. She's going to TV in Shreveport, right? And she's telling everybody she's going to have your baby. I'm like, what? That was common in those days. It was like everybody that was pregnant, well, it's going to be so by some such as person in the wrestling business or whatever. And what are you going to do anyway? You can't tell the fans not to fucking say shit, so I didn't care, whatever the fuck, right? But I would hear this and then every once in a while I would get, like, instead of the fan mail at Crockett's office, I would get a card from this fucking woman for Father's Day, but say, you're a lousy dad. I mean, what the fuck? Right? So finally, I was in Louisiana in 1984. In 1993, in East Tennessee, I get a letter from the state of Louisiana. You have not been paying child support. No shit. And you blah, 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 and so alleges. And I call these people, and I'm saying, you got to be out of your mind. Are you telling me that she is legitimate? Yes. And basically what the deal was if she went to the state and claimed that I was the father, then I had to take the test to prove that I wasn't. Because Louisiana is a crooked state anyway. I forget exactly what the fucking statute was or whatever, but it wasn't even like this was a lawsuit. This was a legal thing with the state. They were going to start allegedly billing me for child support unless I could prove that I was not the father. So I had to go and have a blood test. But here was the thing. I'd known for years because at one point she had sent a card saying so-and-so born on such and such, right? So I looked up the last time that I even spent the night in Shreveport, Louisiana, which I did not have noted whether or not that I was occupied with this young lady or not at that night, but I knew the last time that I had spent the night in Shreveport, Louisiana. And guess how long it was till the birth of this child? 10 months and 2 weeks. So when I got on the phone with the people in Louisiana, I said, unless she had a baby rhinoceros or elephant, what other gestation period? But I had to actually go and have a blood test and send it down to him to prove that there was in no way any relation between me and this woman's child, which there wasn't. And then I think I still have a copy around here somewhere. I sent them, the state of Louisiana or the child services or whatever their department was, a nice letter about how she had inconvenienced me and run me around the goddamn bend for some fucking ex-wrestling whore that if she had as many sticking out of her she'd had stuck in her, she'd look like a porcupine, when a little simple mathematics could have told you that it wasn't possible. And I don't know who she stuck that one on. But these things do happen.
When you heard she was going to be in Shreveport, was that the week you showed up in drag?
No, actually, I borrowed the dress from her. That's what it was. Oh, for heaven's sake. But anyway, you know what would have saved everybody all this trouble, Brian? If they just went to bed and got a good night's sleep. If they just went to bed and got a good night's sleep, none of these troubles would happen. And folks, if you want to go to bed and get a good night's sleep, instead of being sued by some hooer in Shreveport for something you had nothing to do with, folks, the people at Helix Sleep are the ones for you. As a matter of fact, that's another way that I was able to while away my night in blissful slumber the other night, Brian, when there was no power on in the house, no heat on in the house, ice falling around us outside. But the Helix mattress was like laying in the belly of a warm puppy, firm yet comforting. And all the bad weather was just a world away. And we were able to have a good night's sleep and refresh ourselves until our power was restored, all because of the Helix mattress. And well, you know, because you got one too, it's like falling into a cloud instead of going to bed.
I love my Helix mattress. The best thing about being sick and laying in bed all day has been the fact that I'm laying on a Helix mattress. So other than the fact that I feel like I'm dying, I feel like I'm laying on a cloud.
There's some joke about you're going to heaven. I don't know. But anyway, thank you for that meaningful contribution to this spot. So, folks, the Helix, here's the thing. You get on helixsleep.com is what you do. It's HELIX sleep.com. And you take a 2-minute quiz talking about how you sleep and the position and how you like to sleep and whether you like soft, medium, or firm, talking mattresses here now, whatever the case may be. You answer a couple of questions because they've got different models to choose from. And so then they match you with the mattress that best fits your sleep preferences, and it comes right to your door in a box. The unboxing process is tremendous. It doesn't injure anybody. It slowly just comes to life right where you want it, but you don't need a whole crew of movers and Mo, Larry, and Curly to bring it in for you. Anyway, if you go to helixsleep.com/JCE, take the quiz, get the mattress. Right now, Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/JCE. So regardless, whether you want to sleep, whether you want to watch TV, whether you want to produce illegitimate offspring, this is the best mattress to do it on. helixsleep.com helix.com/JCE, up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows, depending on which package you get there at helixsleep.com. Brian, it's like sleeping on a fluffy cloud, a box of fluffy ducks.